Got it.
Okay, well, Jim, as you know, I have valued your work for, I think, probably about 12, 14 years now, since Tom Atlee first introduced me. But I can't, what I just shared with you before we started recording it, so I want to make sure we capture this, is that I can't even imagine in any deep emotional way what it must be like to be in your shoes, being at the helm of, or the creator of a, a communications technology, for lack of a better word, a way of facilitating human to human to human interactions, communication that so consistently can produce breakthroughs and insights and get beyond bottlenecks and problems that so many other forms of communication either stumble into or produce or roadblocks where they can't get through. And yet to not see, to not experience this, what you've created really taking off in the way that I know your heart and mind, and many of us who have known of your work for some time would love to see it do. I can't imagine the challenge emotionally that must be for you. So I just welcome, I have no agenda in terms of this conversation. I just want us to go wherever life spirit wants it to go. But I would love to have you update me, and whoever would be watching or listening to this, sort of where you are, personally, but especially professionally, especially in terms of your own legacy work, and what you see as some of the challenges that we're now facing in this very weird time. Here we are speaking at the end of May in 2022, where we've been dealing with COVID for 2 years. We're dealing with the contraction or the collapse, although it's a many decades, usually long process of collapse, but we're dealing with a contracting process of civilization and the biosphere and the stability of the climate and all the rest of that. So I'd love to hear you just share anything that you're led to share in terms of any of that, but also especially how you see your work, or what you would like. So ideally how your work would be adopted and go forward, and what it offers our world and our society and groups at this time. And then just also anything you'd be willing to share on a more personal, how do you wake up each day still motivated to make the biggest difference you can make, given your gifts and limitations? And how do you, what inspires you, or what supports you in staying sane, sober, and inspired, to the degree that that's possible for any of us at this time, in these interesting and in some ways crazy making times?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, to me, there's like, I just had this conversation with someone in writing. To me, there's like normal life, and we're sort of attached to it. We'd love it to keep going. And you're bringing up post-doom, which I think is, everything about your work, which describes the collapse, the coming collapse, and the historical references to the collapse, all of that is happening. But I don't go to the place of therefore, and the other piece I want to add is that all of the solutions, including dynamic facilitation, the wisdom council process, choice creating, all those things add up to not enough.
Well, not enough for certain things, but enough to make a difference in some ways.
Make a difference in people's lives and helping people grapple with this, etc. So I want to just kind of start with the basis of what you, I think, teach, and in such an effective way. It's just that when you go to I want to go to the place of human creativity and how that facilitated to solve impossible to solve problems.
Yeah. But before you even go there, Jim, could you just take, because I don't know, who or in what context this video will be watched, or the audio. So for anybody who's not familiar yet with your work, who dynamic facilitation, they never heard of that, Jim Ruff, they don't know who you are, take just a couple of minutes and just help anybody who may be new, that's watching or listening to this conversation, get what you bring to the table, like who you are.
Yes. Okay. So so it really starts with me being interested in creativity and the ability of if creativity exists, if human creativity exists, then it seems to me that we can solve impossible to solve problems, that's just normal. And in fact, and so I was fortunate enough to work in a timber company, Simpson Timber Company, and I was an internal consultant. And I reported outside of the normal channels so that I kind of had a laboratory to practice and think some of this stuff. And so I was convinced that people could solve impossible to solve problems and that I could facilitate it, or that it could be facilitated. And I ended up going to the Creative Problem Solving Institute in Buffalo, New York for about 20 years. And then I was on the faculty. And it was a struggle for me because they use things like brainstorming and synectics and things like that that really don't deal with the kinds of problems you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
They deal with, improved marketing things and so forth, and they are breakthroughs, but they're really hanging, they steer away from the emotionally dripping with feelings type problems.
Yeah.
So, but that was my focus, is how is it possible to face into dragon problems or impossible monster problems and achieve progress? And I had a laboratory. It was a sawmill.
Yeah.
And management said, Jim, just go make these people feel better, because they were in meetings all day, every day that they did not want to be in, fighting with the union. And so they gave me a really big, a lot of latitude, a leash with a long leash. And I had this idea that if these employees if I could gather some of these employees to facilitate them to solve their problems, find their most important issues, the ones they thought were impossible to solve, and help them solve those, that would be. And so that was a practice ground for me to try different stuff. And I tried everything out there, really. And then I ended up I was at the same time studying Carl Jung and Jungian psychology and, transpersonal psychology and all this other stuff. And I started putting some of these things together. And what was happening in the mill is that all kinds of things were happening. Like they would take some impossible to solve problem. Like, for instance, we hate the foreman, we want him fired. Or we want to hire 2 more people for this department or something like that. Those really weren't impossible to solve problems. Those were solution ideas to some undefined problem. And as I developed dynamic facilitation, really, they would have breakthroughs and shifts and look together at one, and they became friends. I mean, they hated each other before.
Yes, exactly.
And they would solve the problem because they'd realize, well, it really isn't the foreman, it's the management system. And at the same time, they would realize, well, they actually wouldn't, I'd have to point it out to them, but they are changing the management system. They are addressing it. It's being solved. That deeper, richer problem that they identified, which is causing to get their foreman fired, really is in the system. And they're fixing the system. They're changing the system.
Yeah, they're evolving the system, right?
They're evolving the system. Yes, thank you. So, and what actually happened is things got better. The foreman got excited about being a part of this group.
Yes.
And was in tears. Absolutely.
Yes.
Going to bring me to tears.
Yes.
And this was the day shift foreman and the night shift foreman. So I got to see this happen in both places. But it was a small group, really. So we had this sense of community, this sense of personal development. People were going home. We were like in the child abuse capital of the world. I mean, and this was not happening.
Yeah.
These people had a different attitude about family.
Yes.
And so they were progressing in that way, and they were solving the mill problem because, like, they would say, hire 2 more people, and then they'd invent something that essentially hired 2 more people. So they didn't quite solve the problem. They didn't have the solution option they had identified was not really the solution
Sure.
that was best. So, and then there was one other piece, Michael, and that is that I was only dealing with two groups, one in the morning and one in the evening.
Right.
The whole mill was in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
The entire mill would these guys would identify an impossible to solve problem, and they'd somehow share it with the people in the mill, and everybody in the mill would be working on it.
Yeah. Duh. Right.
And this was incredible because it
Sure.
opens doors that nobody could ever have imagined. Now,
And what time block was this? When is this? The 90s, 80s?
Before 84, yeah.
Okay, before
I left
84.
yeah, I left. So it was 1980, 81, 82, something like that.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And management wasn't a part of any of this.
Mhm.
So these are hourly employees, and management struggling with the union.
Mhm.
These are hourly employees transforming the system of how operations work in the mill and transforming the attitude of the union, because they go to the union, they say,
Right, of
what are
course.
you doing? We don't need this
Yeah.
fight. Thank you. We're trying to do stuff here.
Of course.
So I got to see that. And I realized that the key of it was the ability to bring these people into a quality of thinking.
Right.
Now, one of the exciting things about this quality of thinking is that I don't have to teach it. Everybody's got it already. They just have to get into an environment where it can be released.
Right. Exactly.
And I call this quality of thinking choice creating. And I think it's similar to the kind of thinking that environmentalists are sitting around thinking, God, I hope things get really bad so we'll all work together and solve these problems.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is they want to get into a mind shift so that we all shift our minds and we get to what I call choice creating.
Mhm.
And what I think dynamic facilitation does, which I didn't call it that then, but I do
Right.
now,
Right.
is a reliable way to evoke choice creating.
Yes. Got it.
Quality of thinking that is
Precisely.
heartfelt, creative, collaborative, where we take these monster problems and we have
And facilitating empathy or understanding of the other from the inside.
exactly
As it
right.
were. Yeah.
Yes, because people, they liked the foreman. The foreman's in tears because he treated them so poorly.
Yeah.
And the rest of the mill is resonating with all this.
Yes. Yes.
So now I take this, to me, so I've got these things I'm teaching. One is what I call the, dynamic facilitation is sort of the key, this ability to get to choice creating, and choice creating is magic sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And then I call the wisdom council process an ability to take a system of people,
Yes.
like a school or a hospital or trying to do it with a local church or something, or within government, and have them set it up so that it happens like it did in the mill, where the whole mill is somehow in the conversation.
Right.
And the whole mill is having these experiences as well, not just the small group.
Right.
Okay, so I'm saying that all of that's been my work.
Mm-hmm.
And Gene and I moved to Port Townsend, and we were going to take a year off. But I don't know, we're still here. So, but anyway, but the deal is we began to say, how do we stay here? And so I began to think, well, I found some things. I could teach seminars in this stuff. And it really has to do with solving impossible. How do you get a solving impossible to solve problems? That's what we're talking about here.
Right.
And monster problems.
Right.
And so I would say in the seminars, let's get a list of these monsters, everything you care about. Let's get a list of these things. What are some of the things you care about? Mm-hmm. And the people would practice the skills in small groups, and they would have breakthroughs. They would have shifts. They would have, hey.
Right.
And often it was the same shift. So they would choose things like, climate change or, inner city crime or, just what we're doing to our men and romance, whatever. It could be whatever that was on their mind. And they would, and the breakthroughs often pointed exactly the same direction as what the mill workers found. Hey, this isn't about evil CEOs.
Right.
This isn't about, the bad people who don't believe in Jesus, whatever. This is about, this is about the system.
Yes.
The system. And the system is structured a certain way to generate a certain set of behaviors that generates a certain kind of thinking, a certain kind of relationship to one another,
And a certain kind of culture.
and a certain kind of culture, and even what I call human nature, a certain kind of human nature.
Right.
So there's a whole, so I was talking already about dynamic facilitation and the wisdom council process and choice creating. Now I'm talking about, okay, what I'm starting to talk about, maybe we could do this for all of society. Because to facilitate, when I go into to facilitate, or when somebody does to dynamically facilitate people facing this demonstrable problem, it's just one person, and I don't teach the people how to think. There isn't the skills, they already have the skills, they just need the context.
Right.
And so that's what dynamic facilitation it does, it sets it up. And it can do it for the whole system. It doesn't need to do it just for that small group. That one facilitative element could transform the thinking of the whole system, of the global system, of the national system. And
Yeah,
so
that's where I would want to lean into you because I may see things differently, in that what is possible at one scale may not be possible at another scale, certainly not in the same way. I remember back many years ago, there was that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, or whatever.
Yeah.
And, it was like, is the basketball here or here, this sort of thing. And at the subatomic scale, that's absolutely true. There's an indeterminacy in terms of where, the subatomic particle is. But at the basketball scale, no, the basketball is either there or there or there. So there's this conflation of scale that sometimes happens. And I see your work as literally among the best on the planet at certain scale and for certain purposes. And I have my own, because so much of my work in the last decade, especially the last 9 years, has been about the distinction between things that are genuinely problems, even if we experience them as so-called impossible problems that actually can be solved. There can be breakthroughs possible, and things that are predicaments that the predicaments by their very definition have no solution. They have to be lived with, adapted to. Death is a predicament. It's not a problem to be solved. So what are those differences? And I think many of the human to human dynamics in terms of communication, relationship, and things like that are certainly able to be transformed using the kinds of things, dynamic facilitation, wisdom councils, etc. But the human to earth dynamics, some of those things at least are predicaments. We're beyond any human ability to cooperate to solve them, because they're not problems. If they ever were, they're certainly not problems now. They're several thousand years of a process that's now out of our control. So that would be the one thing I'd want to lean into you with in terms of where we might see things differently.
Yes. Well, okay. I want to continue my story, but I also want to reshape how we're talking here, because if you're able to convince me of what you're doing, we're not better off. If I'm able to influence you a little bit, where you go, holy smoke, this could be changing everything, that could be pretty exciting, because you have a marvelous network and an ability to talk and lots of skills that I don't have.
I welcome, if that can happen, I welcome that happening.
Well, I want that. That's what
okay,
I
good.
want that.
Good.
Okay?
I'm wide open to it. Okay.
All right, good. Because, okay, so what happened in the seminars is that people would have all these problems and all these, sometimes they would choose big basketball level size problems, like climate change or the, I'm trying to think of, maldistribution of wealth,
Sure, sure.
whatever. And they would have shifts, insights, shifts, and breakthroughs.
Right.
And I'm sort of holding, they go away. They're practicing skills for when they go back to their environment. I'm stuck holding this basket of breakthroughs that on one night, May 9th, 1993, they all came together for me. And I got it in my mind, I got it. Our system is terminal. It cannot work.
Yeah.
Here's how to transform the system. It's essentially the old mill story, except it has to happen globally and it has to happen nationally. Now, can that happen is the question. Can we do this at large, super large scale? Well, I haven't had a chance to try it globally yet.
But it's more likely to happen if at least some of us think that it is possible.
Yes, exactly. And I'm trying to identify a group that I call the democracy doulas that are those.
Democracy doulas. I love it. I love it.
Those are the people that I think are, I have a checklist on the website where if you get this part and get this part and get this part, then you're one of us. So, but the thing is that I was just reading this morning about this great article in the New York Times a few months ago, and I posted it on my desk, and it came back to me. And this morning, just before we talked, about how Lincoln really wrote the U.S. Constitution.
Say more. I don't know. I didn't see that article, so I don't know.
Well, it's so cool. I just think it's so cool because the U.S. Constitution was a phenomenal document. It's awesome. It set up our system. That is the national system. And in fact, that system, it's an example, I think, of what we're talking about. There was a moment in time where everybody checked out, not everybody, just a small group checked out and said, okay, we're going to go back to the king thing if we're not careful here. You guys want to think about that? And, because they have the king system, and then maybe is there some other system maybe we could go to? And it's really awesome. And in my mind, George Washington was the facilitator because he didn't say anything. He was unanimously elected president of the convention and did not say anything really.
Yes.
And then in the evenings, he was taking people out to dinner or visiting and whatever. And they came up, they knew it, even though they were following supposedly parliamentary procedure. Everybody got it that this needs everybody. We need everybody on board, every state, every person, every delegate. We need the whole continent. Now, of course, we're not talking women or non-property holders or slaves,
Right.
Native Americans, but of the stakeholders, they actually did that. They actually facilitated everybody to say, okay, let's try this new system.
Yep.
It was after it was first, hey, we need a Bill of Rights. They had the constitutional, they said we need a Bill of Rights. And part of why I'm telling this is because I think I want to do the same thing now, today, at a different, at the basketball level that you were describing. So they set up a design and it kind of got ratified. And then at that point, pretty much everybody said, yeah, let's try this new design. But it was morally compromised because of the slave issue, especially. Morally compromised. And many people really knew that.
Yeah.
But it was Abe Lincoln during the Civil War who got it, that he could claim that he was going to save the Union, and therefore he could confiscate the property, and he could declare the slaves free, which meant that no longer the whole Constitution, a lot of the Constitution was tied up in all these restrictions on how many 3/5 of the people would be, anybody who was slaves was 3/5 of a person, and the slavery would have to continue for 20 years, and any free state had to return slaves. I mean, it was all kinds of, that was that was how that document handled it.
And a lot of people don't know the economic grounding of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but anyway, I was reading that article, and that's as soon as I forget how you talk to me, but so how do we do that today? How do we have that moment today where all of us globally step back and say, this isn't working. Let's design something and try something else. And then the UN and the national governments and everything can kind of get in alignment, and the corporations and everything can get in alignment. And how can we collectively, just like in the mill, start facing these monster impossible problems and come to some kind of unity about what to do about them at a
Yeah.
large scale?
Yeah. Well, I would love for you to paint out a picture for anybody watching or listening to this that's finding themselves leaning in. They want to hear more. They're enticed or allured by what you're saying. If you were able to be successful, let's say in the next 5 years or 3 years or whatever, but some relatively short and fairly
Short
close
time, 3
time
years,
frame.
yeah.
In the next 3 years, if the whoever would need to have a breakthrough of heart and a breakthrough of mind to begin to enact this kind of thing, what would you, and let's say it actually caught on, and there was like this, there was sort of the impossible breakthrough that became possible. How would that look, feel, sound like? Like, give me a sense of what the world would be different, say in 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, based on that. Like, what vision is alluring to you that you believe is actually possible, even though most people think perhaps that it's impossible?
Yeah, I think it's actually possible, and it's really spooky how big the benefits can be.
Sure. So yeah, flesh that out.
And how accessible this is. In other words, how we do this and what the Wisdom Council process is that we would randomly select from the global population.
Who's the we?
There would just be the democracy doulas at the beginning.
Okay.
This is another thing. We don't need permission from anybody to do this. We're not out there trying to sell it to many people and reaching a tipping point and all that stuff. We don't have to do that.
Okay.
This is about including everybody, but only a few of us have to understand how to do the facilitation.
Okay.
And anybody's welcome, but it requires a few of us. So we would get maybe $3 million. I really don't think we need much money. And we would hire some polling firm to deliver for us 12 to 16 people from the global population that are random. That's like step one. And we could bring them to the same location. We can take their picture, because maybe this is the first time ever we've got a legitimate symbol of all the people. I mean, as legitimate as it can be. We're just doing our best here. We don't have to do it perfect.
Right.
We're just trying to do our best to get random, do our best to bring people together. And then we dynamically facilitate them for a short period of time. They learn, and I've learned, I used to think that they would pick the issue, but I've learned that it sells better if the issue is known ahead of time. So that's okay. So the issue could be, COVID-19 or whatever, global response to COVID-19 or to the Ukraine-Russia war, something like that. And so you randomly select these people. The key here is nobody is representing anything. They're all individual people, individuals. Now we have to protect against that in some way, but we need actual people. And then they are dynamically facilitated. And the way they make progress is they make progress in jumps and leaps, breakthroughs. They don't make progress convincing, discussing, agreeing and disagreeing. They don't do any of that. So at the end of maybe 3 days, they are pumped. They are so excited about one another, about being here, about the point they got. And they didn't go all the way, and maybe they don't have a breakthrough, but they get They have breakthroughs in clarity for sure.
Mhm.
And then they walk on stage, and we have a lot of celebrities and things that people want to watch, and they present their conclusions and their story,
Mhm.
the individual story and their collective story of the breakthroughs they made. And they're done.
Mhm.
Now everybody turns their chairs and the cameras walk around, and they're that have a global audience, the CNN or whoever is on the case. And you get to see the movie stars or whoever, I don't know who talks.
Mhm.
But the usual reaction is, yeah, why are we doing that? Maybe they forgot this and they forgot that, but we've just this simple thing has
You're
transformed.
accessing collective intelligence on a larger scale.
Exactly. It changes the total way of talking and thinking. We're now not arguing and fighting. It's not, see, our system, the core of our system sets up a special interest battle.
Correct.
There is no voice of the public interest.
Correct.
Here is a way to create that voice. Finally, this is the public interest, which in this case, the species interest,
Right.
or even trans species. It's really
Right.
about
Right.
it's really about coming from the heart about what we all want. And then they're gone. They leave. And what we found is that, and this is, and of course, in 2 months or whatever, we have another random group, another group that can pick up and say, oh, well, did anything happen last time? Did anything happen since then? We can always, and usually the answer is, well, I don't think so. And then it's like, oh yeah, sure, there was that. Oh yeah, and there was that, and there was, it goes like that. And then they say, well, okay, well, we'll start on our issue, and then they go some more. And what we keep this process going, and what it does is it transforms the global conversation and creates an evolutionary new species. We the people, ultimately in charge
Mhm.
of this and capable of managing the planetary resources and governments, and it really is an evolutionary leap, I believe, that we're talking about here.
Mhm.
It's just like the cells of the body coming together into a different kind of organism.
I'm curious I'd love to hear your articulation rather than me attempt to, ask questions along these lines. What do you think are the dynamics, the possible patterns, the possible points of where somebody, either an individual or a group or a corporation or whatever, would try to influence? Like, where are the possible things to be aware of that might seek to corrupt or to hijack or to steer or guide it in their self-interest? And what would be the protections for that?
Interesting you mentioned that, because Tom Atlee has been he doesn't even want me to go on his path because he's so worried about that. But to me, it's hard for me to imagine how this could work, because first of all, everybody as an individual is on board with what we're doing. They can talk. They can, if you want to, if you're the one person who, quote, disagrees and wants to go in a different direction, you're part of the conversation. And this kind of conversation goes to you and says, hey, Michael, tell us what you're thinking. We're all together here on this. Why aren't you, what's your hesitation? So, because to be creative, we need diversity of views.
Absolutely.
It's unlike in our current system. To make headway, we got to get rid of the diversity. We got to, if everybody would just believe my God instead of your God, then we'd be okay. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to do a creative zone of thinking, and I'm not talking about the whole time, I'm saying we keep everything we got. It's just that we add the missing conversation where diversity is valued and so forth. Mm-hmm. So every special interest that's out there is actually trying to hang on to the old, I call it the box system. That's really the box system. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, we'll keep the box, but we'll add the circle conversation on top of it. And as soon as that starts to begin operational, then we start transforming the box. Mm-hmm. then there's a we that can say, oh yeah, well, it's so crazy to have UN with only 5 countries and the Security Council, but we could change things. There's an ability to change things. So, and I guess the heart of what you're talking about is that, let's say everybody's selfish at your Thanksgiving dinner and they all want the potatoes.
Well, usually everybody's not going to be selfish. Only 1% or so of the
1%.
human species are born as sociopaths or psychopaths, where they can't feel.
And they exist. I got to admit it, they exist, but I don't run into them much. But I don't. The meetings that I've had, I'm sure have had them in there, but they don't seem to be identifiable.
Sure.
So, they don't stand out in that way. So,
right, of course.
I've had them and run into them in my personal life, and I had Trump for president for one thing. So, but so, how do we? I'm really saying that it's like when you pull people out of their context as people, yeah, they want to preserve the planet, and they want to have a place for their grandkids, and they want to have a life. They don't think the way our current system enforces. Our current system enforces us to be in special interests, where you only keep your job if you maximize profits in an immoral way, maybe.
Right.
But when we pull people out of that, which is what we're doing, for just a brief moment to stop and think, and we reach some kind of unity, that dramatically affects the whole corporate. I did one wisdom council I did a series actually for a farm credit bank, and what's coming to my mind is this example where the wisdom council met. We randomly selected maybe 8 or 9 people, I guess, and they basically said, we're not a forward-thinking organization. That's our theme, that's what we talk about, but we don't do that. And we they gave examples. And then I left, I went away for 6 months till the next wisdom council, and they randomly selected a new group. And I said, well, is anything, oh no, somebody in the group said, hey, has anything happened since that last wisdom council? And somebody said, what was it? He says, well, they said we're not a forward-thinking organization. And I said, well, yeah, I know that. And then there was this ugly silence, actually. Ugly silence. I was like, oh, and finally somebody says, well, actually, I know that the management steering committee talks about it at the first part of every meeting, and then somebody else says, well, I know our group talks about it. And somebody else, we went around the table and everybody's talking about it.
Too cute.
So it was really cool. And then they put it away and started on their issue, which was something else. But they came up with something that they realized was exactly helping move the organization that way. So I don't know how you would undermine it. I don't really know. I'm sure somebody could come put a bug in my computer and I'd be just screwed.
Yeah, no, it's not so much undermining. There may be some people that Tom Atlee may be one of them that fears that or is concerned about that, whatever. I'm less less confident that that's the issue. For me, the issue really where I find my own personal focus in these here almost mid 2022 is what are the dynamics at the scale of the biosphere, at the scale of the air, water, soil, forest, life upon which we depend, that are truly out of our control, that are truly impossible for humans to change, for very well-known laws of physics, biology, and ecology. And that no amount, that if somehow a magic wand could be waved and 8 billion or 7.9 billion human beings agreed tonight on a particular course of action beginning tomorrow, it wouldn't be enough to change a few things that are already in runaway, unstoppable, out of control mode, such as the forests of the world burning, such as the acidification of the oceans, such as, and I could go on. I'm not going to do a litany of that.
Yeah.
And those are the things that lead me to think again at scale, sort of like Russian nesting dolls, that at that scale there are already at least a half a dozen to a dozen, some think many more than that, uh, um, biospheric level processes that are truly unstoppable and out of our control. That if everybody died tonight, it wouldn't make a difference. And if everybody was converted to the same ecologically wise perspective and fully adopted everything that Jim Ruff and anybody like you is advocating, it couldn't change those few things. Um, so, but that's not the only scale. There are all of these other scales in terms of how do people interact at scales of villages, of councils, of cities, of towns, of states, of precincts, of counties, of whatever. And that's where collapse is never a uniform, homogenous thing. Collapse shows up in a million different ways, in a million different places, at a million different time scales. And some communities will suffer immensely, and everybody in that community will be dead 3 years from now. And other communities could very well survive into at least the short-term future, if not the long-term future, in ways that they cooperate and they solve problems together and they access collective intelligence. And so I see your work and other means of helping people to communicate and see differences and have transformations of the heart and paradigm transformations of the mind as essential, as holy work at certain scales, even if they may not be able to solve, because they're not they're not problems that can be solved, sort of the larger scale, so that even if we go extinct as a species, say in 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, there's still a tremendous amount that can be done for us to assist other species in going through this bottleneck, such as my wife's work in assisted migration, or what indigenous peoples call helping forest walk, to everything from building tops. So, I mean, anything that we can do to be a blessing to other species, and anything that we can do to lessen the suffering, to lessen the vitriol, the bitterness, the hatred, the blame, to my mind, is holy work. So I see your work as having essential value at certain scale, and whether it's effective at these larger, what I consider unstoppable scales, is beside the point. It doesn't need to be, to still be essential things that we invest time and energy and passion and creativity and in at whatever scales they can be effective.
Well, I'm saying that there's a world that you just described, which dynamic facilitation, the wisdom council process, and choice creating can be, like you say, that's the holy work for the different scales. Now, when we talk about the big scale, all this unstoppable stuff that's impossible, all this other dimension, that's what I talk about society's breakthrough. In other words, applying all that. So we'll just take all the local stuff. I mean, the local, regional, and everything. Put that. Yes, that has to happen. No question. We have to do that. And here's a set of tools that I'm really proud of that can be used there. But I'm also saying that for the large scale, we have not talked yet. We have not started. There is all these experts that are agreeing that is impossible are standing in a paradigm that cannot deal with this problem. It's no question. And I know that a lot of it is physics and so forth, but I'm also aware that, along comes, there's always one of the puzzles that I always liked was, I would ask people, show me when you understand that half of 8 is equal to 0. And the audience would kind of, they wouldn't look, blindly, and they just, it would be a struggle. And finally, one hand would go up, and then another hand, and another hand. You know what I'm talking about? You've seen this before. In other words, to see the 8 is to realize, oh, half of 8 is 0, as well as 4. And
Right.
And it's like the only way you can talk about impossible is if you hold to one logical framework. That's the only way you can do it. Otherwise, you're always in a space where there's more possibilities. But if you hold to one framework like mathematics, you're screwed because there's only one answer. And it's impossible for it to be zero.
Yeah, let me first of all, I love that analogy, and it's very useful. Let me try to articulate, and if you use this video, feel free to edit out what I'm about to say, because I want you to be able to use this material for whatever you find valuable and useful. But I just want to articulate sort of the bottom line of where I'm coming from. That is my essential worldview.
Yeah.
Is that there are two fundamentally different ways of being human in relationship to primary reality. And by primary reality, what I mean is everything inside us and everything outside us that we don't exist without. So from my microbiome to the plankton, to the oceans, to the trees, everything inside us and outside us that we don't exist without is what I call primary reality. And those are systems. It's the water system, the nitrogen system, the phosphorus system, the carbon system, the soil system, all of the interactions that make for soil and all the systems that allow other species to exist and blah, blah, blah. Truly sustainable, there's only one way to be sustainable. And it's not the kind of faux sustainability or greenwashed, quote unquote, sustainability that we see bannered about and hear bannered about today. True sustainability, and every indigenous culture throughout human history knew this, that was truly sustainable, is that the systems that allow you to survive and thrive are treated as a greater thou, not a lesser it. So the systems that provide your food, the systems that provide you all of your materials for building, creating, clothing, shelter, whatever, all those systems are preserved upon pain of death or ostracizing. I mean, they are sacred. They can't be bought or sold. They are more important than us. They're more important than our tribe, and they are preserved. They're treated like God, like a greater thou, not a lesser it. That's one way of being human. That's the only truly sustainable way of being human, because it's the same thing as every other species that has ever existed in Earth history. Every other species, either by choice or more often simply by the interactions of other species, could not do irreparable damage to the systems that provide them what they survive and thrive, or if they could, then they go through overshoot and collapse. There's lots of species that go through that pattern. And that we big humans have overpowered the other animals, the other creatures, the other dynamics of Earth system, biosphere dynamics, that could limit us. So we've now been for 6 or 7 or 8,000 years, most human-centered, anthropocentric civilizations are not preservative. That is, our primary sacred responsibility isn't to preserve the well-being of the biosphere and its integrity and its health and well-being, so that wealth, well-being, progress, success is measured in life-centered terms, like how well is the soil doing decade by decade, how well the forest doing decade by decade, how well the other creatures doing decade by decade. Life-centered or ecocentric measures of wealth and well-being are sustainable. Extractive cultures, human-centered city-based civilizations tend to take the living world, create stuff out of it, and then wealth and well-being is measured by the well-being or wealth of kings or emperors or gross domestic product or whatever. But it's human-centered. It's individuals and groups of humans. Their wealth and well-being. That's what success, or that's what progress, or that's what wealth or well-being is measured. And every single example of that throughout human history, we have over 100 examples. Boom and bust, rise and fall, progress, regress. They go through overshoot, the carrying capacity, and then they collapse. We are so far into overshoot now. We are so far into the degradation of the air, water, soil, force, and life upon which we depend, that they now have their own momentum. They're literally out of our control. And so we think we can have control over the, geoengineering is a whole continued myth that we can still control these systems. But it's that thinking that actually got us in this mess in the first place. So my fundamental worldview is that we have dishonored the grace limits of the living world. For me, that's the way I interpret the mythic story of the fall. Isn't disobedience. It's not literally eating an apple. It's dishonoring the grace limits of the living world, that there's a limit to how much we can take and limit to how much waste we can exude before the systems break down. It's called carrying capacity in the ecological world. And we've now overpowered those, we've overshot those so long and in every civilization, but now we've got a global civilization that we're living in the age of consequences. And I don't see any miraculous technology, any human dynamics of communication and decision making and wisdom gathering that can slow, stop, or reverse the collapse of the biosphere, the collapse of the stability of the Holocene, the collapse of the climate. So that's where I both tremendously value your work at certain scale and see that no matter how much you wish or you believe or you envision that it could work at these other levels, I think, well, that's diluted because you don't have the ecological framework that's, for example, William Catton articulates in his book Overshoot. So anyway, so that's sort of, feel free to edit all that out and have it come back to what you'd like to have.
I accept all that. That's why we're talking. I'm trying to influence you to open a little bit, because I think we all enter into worlds of denial, and most people are into denying what you just talked about. I don't think I am. I think the part that I'm trying to help people get out of denial about is the human possibility. Like you talked, a lot of what you were saying is the human-centered orientation and the anthropocentric and whatever. Yeah, if we could change that overnight, that's a start. But it's not, like you say, it's not dealing with the overshoot maybe. But as soon as we start thinking, there's all these logical frameworks. I was a physics major in college, and I get it that now that there's no such thing as a law of physics. There's no such thing. It's just a descriptive equation, and it changes. And so even the consonants for, I mean, when you get a Einstein that comes along and changes Newton's idea of gravitation, it's like, oh shit, well, I guess we were wrong about that. That is, yeah, I know it's Newton's law of physics. Okay, yeah, well, now we don't have that law anymore. Now we have a different approximation. So to me, I'm a little bit at war with the Serenity Prayer, for instance, which I know you like. I mean,
well, I like it in certain contexts. It's useful, yeah. I find.
Well, the whole idea of saying, oh, well, I'm not sure I can actually say it.
Oh, yeah, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. The courage
like that comes first. But hello, somebody's in there telling me what I can and can't change. I mean, did I already?
No, the biosphere. See, this is the thing. I'm truly an ecocentric person. So to me, the only being, the only reality that can possibly dictate what cannot be changed is what would be called in secular language the biosphere, or Gaia, or the living world. And to my mind, it's not just neutral. To my mind, and this is where I'm going to step out and say things that I really haven't said publicly very much yet, but to my mind, if more people believe like you, if more people believe that it actually is still possible, and not just possible, but doable, to essentially keep civilization.
I don't know that.
Yeah, no.
We haven't started thinking yet.
Right, but if we don't, okay, so let me say it in my language then. If millions of people, tens of millions of people, maybe billions of people, continue to believe that it's possible to slow, stop, or reverse biospheric collapse and the collapse of industrial civilization. Let's just take those two things. We will not attend to, in my opinion, the two things that we must attend to avoid being evil on a geological timescale. One is capping the nukes, keep getting the spent fuel rods out of the swimming pools. If we think that we can slow, stop, or reverse biospheric collapse and the collapse of industrial civilization, we're going to ignore or procrastinate or not get around to. We're not going to see as an urgent, immediate necessity as soon as possible getting the spent fuel rods out of the swimming pools and into some place like Yucca Mountain or the equivalent. because we'll basically think that we can still, our optimism or our sense of possibility is going to have us not attend to that. And we're also not going to attend to helping other species to migrate north or migrate poleward faster than any other means that they can do. So those are the two things that only if we know that civilizational collapse is inevitable, it's unstoppable, it's already in process, and we can't stop it. And the stability that allowed us to grow grain at scale, that allowed for the creation of civilizations, and now the support of 7-8 billion human beings. If we don't know for a fact that that's going away, and that's going away soon, we're not going to help other species, and we're not going to cap the nukes. And so that what we're going to do is our optimism, our hopefulness that things won't collapse too fast is going to actually cause things. That's why William Catton's book Overshoot is I tell people, if you only read one more book the rest of your life to understand the nature of reality, because otherwise, if you don't get that, if you don't get ecological overshoot, and I mean get it into your bones, then the things you're going to be advocating for, the things you'll be hoping for, the things you'll be wanting and wishing could be the truth are actually going to make things worse from an ecocentric or biocentric perspective. So that's why I find myself of two minds. One, of being so grateful and so appreciative of your work and what it makes possible in the human to human and group to group realm. And yet to apply that to things that are not problems, they're not impossible problems, they are fucking predicaments. And to apply that there just means that we will be catastrophically, geologically scale evil in the pretty near future.
I don't know. Did you ever read? I wrote a book for the not a book, an article for the Stanford University blog, Millennium Alliance for the Human.
Yeah, no, I've published there as well. I'm in communication with Joan
but the title of my article is A Wholution for the Human Predicament, because I'm not talking about solutions like you're talking about, and I'm not talking about. I'm talking about and I'm not talking about.
I will read that. I've not seen that yet. I will definitely read that.
Yeah, what you were saying just now, if I was dynamically facilitating, I would be writing a lot in the concern chart.
Of course.
Okay, a lot of concerns that need to be considered. You're concerned about the nuclear rods and so forth. We want to, that's part of the thinking process that needs to be happening, that isn't happening, it hasn't started happening. In other words, you would be a voice saying, we need to make sure that people know in order to, and understand about overshoot in order to deal with these issues. And let me finish one more thing. It's the other piece of it is, I feel the same passion you do about the tragedy of the commons. People want to say overshoot. I think overshoot, great, right? That's just a descriptor. It's the dilemma we're in is the tragedy of the commons, and that is where I think the attention needs. So I'm going around trying to help people and designing little exercises so people can kind of recognize that there has to be a we to manage the commons, whatever's left of it. Okay, if we're in overshoot and we have much less than we did, there needs to be that new entity on planet Earth that can capably and responsibly and morally manage the commons that's here, maybe the word manage is not right, but to interact with or to be in relationship with the commons in a way that it all works, And we would be writing down those concerns that you have and seeking how do we come to that new way of being. And we have a structure, an internal structure that is totally human-centered. It's totally structured for special interest to compete, for you to become special interested, to growth. Somebody tells you what you want. And yes, okay, we have to also deal with the problem that it's all too late because a lot of this stuff is already pre-programmed. So, okay, now how is there a we that starts thinking about that? And how do we respond? Maybe it isn't an answer, maybe it's a response.
Yeah.
You know, a collectively intelligent response, one that doesn't involve wars and pestilence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How do we get to a morally responsible path forward as a human species that's respectful of everybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
Involves everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm really grateful that you just articulated all that you just did, and that you know, kept me from interrupting you. I appreciate that. Where I find myself with respect to what you just articulated in the last 3 or 4 minutes is what I critique in my most recent videos, I think you know, is hopium detox and recovery.
I liked it a lot.
You know, accepting and trusting unstoppable collapse is the subtitle, but hopium detox and recovery. And I define hopium, as you know, as a comforting or inspiring vision of the future that requires breaking the laws of physics, biology, or ecology. It gives short-term relief, but it ultimately brings in its heels crushing disappointment when reality inevitably bites. The fundamental thing related to what you just shared is what I critique as the ecocidal hubris, or the myth of the almighty we, that there is a we that can speak with one voice, or that can align in heart and mind to do this or to do that. I mean, we hear it all the time, especially those of us on the liberal and progressive side. If we just did this, or if we just did that, or, you know, sort of the almighty we. And I no longer have any faith in the almighty we, in the sense that my understanding from the study of history of the previous rise and fall of civilizations is that on the way up, empires and civilizations, as they are in what William Catton would call carrying capacity surplus, there's more than enough energy and resources. So the we grows, and the we actually becomes pretty damn powerful, can make some amazing fucking things change. But then on the collapse, once ecological overshoot happens and you're now in a carrying capacity deficit, there's not enough energy, not enough resources for the population, that the we goes away, and the fighting, the in-group, the blame, the judgment, and that becomes really unstoppable. On the downside, we have literally scores of examples of that we going away and tightening up, and it's more about blame. I mean, just think about America. I mean, here you and I are, you know, I'm an American. I live in the United States, and you know, I spent last week or 2 weeks ago with my mother in Key Largo, Florida, who watches Fox News all day long. And her mind and her heart are filled with an understanding of reality that is so at odds with many of my other friends and family. It's almost like we're living in different universes. And so the notion that we can do this, that, or the other thing presupposes a level of shared worldview that doesn't exist in the collapsing of civilizations, and becomes worse the further down the scale, or the further past post-peak oil, post-peak everything, you know, exists.
So let me interrupt.
Go for it. No interrupt. Go for it.
My second blog article,
yeah,
to the MAHB,
a mob, right,
is in order to solve climate change, we need to wait. Who's we?
Oh, I got some good stuff to read up on you that you've written lately. This is great. I look forward to it.
And it's about, yes, to me, there's 4 we's, there's 5 we's, there's a missing we. And that's the we, the magical we, or whatever you call it, the almighty we. There is no we the people, and there must be. And the Global Wisdom Council process can facilitate that global we the people quickly. And I don't know if that can sink in.
I'm a cheerleader for you. I'm not going to run with that myself because I don't think it's possible, but I am sure going to be cheering you from the sidelines.
That's right. That's right. So to me, there's lots of we's that people use, and each we is a side. I've given all the solutions. I call them the solutions to we 1, we 2, and we 3.
Okay.
That you know, we 1 is all about individuals. We have to reach all the individuals. We have to educate them, blah, blah, blah. We 2 is about organizations. We have to develop new technologies. We have to model the land trusts and stuff like that. we have to model how a civilization should be. We three is about official we, which is we have to pass laws and make new treaties and blah, 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 all that stuff. Great. All those solutions are not enough. They can't do it.
Right.
And dynamic facilitation, wisdom council, and all that fits in there too. I mean, there's a whole bunch of solution strategies in there that those we's can deal. There's a missing we, that the almighty we the people, I call it, or we number 4, which is exactly what happened. I think it happened once in history, and it really got there was at the founding of the United States. I don't think there's any other. There was a looking around the virtual room and realizing, oh, we didn't have, again, Native Americans or blacks or whatever, but there was the stakeholders at the time.
Mhm.
It was pretty much unanimous that, oh my God, yes, let's try this new system, and that we designed the system. And they used the term "we the people." They didn't mean to. They didn't know what they were doing. That it was an editing problem, blah blah blah. But they used that term, and it actually, I want to wave my arms and say that term has meaning, and it's really cool, and we can do that again today. We, meaning we's number 0, just a few of us.
Right.
Just a few of us can facilitate we the people, global we the people today, and then everything's different. Everything becomes different. Now we can look around and start thinking, well, geez, okay, we've got this mess here. Well, this is really bad. We got to start. What do we do? You know, I mean, that's what I'm imagining is that can be, and that automatically, if you and I and a few others can facilitate that global we to come into existence, that's a new level of governance. It's a new level of economics. It's a new form of economics. It looks like capitalism maybe at the beginning, but it's now we're all working towards a shared vision. It's a completely different educational process for people that we're all getting up to speed. We're starting. It's a different conversational process, how we interrelate with one another and the planet. Everything changes. Everything.
Well, I don't know that.
I don't want to say, okay, now, and it also changes even our idea of what's possible and what's not, because now all of a sudden, oh gosh, we don't have to keep saying we must or we can't, or we can start saying, well, how could we really do that? You know, how could we get on top of that? Yeah. And that's, to me, that's the issue, is that if you and I, just a few of us, could facilitate that transformational bit where this new we comes into existence, that actually can take charge of governments and think, in other words, corporations, and okay, let's start.
Yeah, I certainly will do you this honor. I will read the 2 things you referenced that were published in MAHB recently, and we'll continue this conversation, because where I currently am pretty solidly grounded is that any human-centered technological culture, that is any culture that is grounded in a form of technology that benefits humans but doesn't benefit other creatures and doesn't become food for other creatures at its end.
Yes.
And any market-based economy, any economic system, doesn't have to be even our form of capitalism, but throughout history, every economic system that has treated the living world not as relatives, but as resources, not as beings to be related to respectfully, but as merely resources for us and a place for our waste, always does itself in. So I don't
100% behind you on that.
Yeah.
But here I'm also saying, though, that here is a way to make that transformation so that it isn't the human-centered. In other words, if when we gather people in a choice-creating spirit of thinking and talking, they're trying to talk just like everybody talks, just like you just did. We're trying to figure out what's best for life, for society, for how it all works.
But I'm no longer there. I'm in the place of seeing that my genuine, deepest held belief is that in less than 10 years, in the next 8 years,
yes,
the climate and our world will change so radically that no mammal larger than this that can burrow into the ground will be alive. I see virtually all humans going extinct in the next 8 years. Most mammals going extinct in the next 8 years.
That's faster than I think, but I think it's true. But I don't quite have that same time frame.
Well, I hope you don't, because that would discourage you from doing the work that you need to do.
No, I think you're right, but I don't think we have that time. We have a window of opportunity because there is a stability right now where you and I can have this conversation.
That's true.
And this conversation could actually, we have a technology and so forth. We have some opportunities that this could be spread widely. So I want to take advantage of this window of opportunity so that we can start, so that there's a few of us, we can start the movement so that there's a we that starts thinking. And okay, yeah, lots of things are too late, so to speak, but, and here's the other thing. You're right about the civilizations having a life cycle. And in fact, it's more than civilizations. It's every living system has a life cycle that involves collapse. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, not exactly. There are some species, reptiles, some crocodile. I mean, there are species that are able to persist more or less sustainably. That is, the way they live doesn't diminish or destroy everything that they depend upon for their survival and thrival for literally millions and millions and millions of years.
Oh yeah, but they may, whatever their life cycle is,
yeah, right.
There seems to be a rapid growth period and a turning and a eating up of the universe, of their system. I don't know, but yeah, but I just want to add the one piece. There's also part of life that something new comes out of that, and there's some kind of growth that comes out of that. It's totally new. Yeah, and it's a different life living system and a different organism, and that's what I'm wanting to talk about. How to make that transition to, okay, we got a different world we're now in. Yeah, but there's a new we that can do it, that can manage that. And here's a way to make that transformation, I believe. Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to continue this conversation because I just love and respect you and your work. And I also am open to the possibility of having my mind and heart shifted on certain things. But the one thing that it just so happens that my wife and I, Connie Barlow, my wife, a science writer, and I, one of the things that we spent many years studying and cataloging is precisely that. What are the examples of emergence, of breakthroughs that you couldn't have predicted, and what are the examples of convergent evolution, where the context is such that the same thing evolves independently in different contexts because the life conditions are such that emergence of that particular thing has. So whatever it is, even if our species goes extinct, which I think there's a better than 90% chances likelihood in the next several decades, if not sooner than that, what is possible that can emerge, and what can we do on this side to facilitate that emergence? That I call it compost theology. Life will regenerate. Regeneration is the way that life does things. So how can we participate in that, and how can we lessen the suffering on the way down? So anyway, let me read these things that you've written. Let's sometime in the next, say, 2 weeks, schedule another conversation. Oh, fun. Okay. Yep. And let's continue this. I greatly appreciate this, Jim. Great. Me too. Me too. Okay. Mike. I really enjoyed our visit. And great. Me too. To know you better. And and it's important. I don't know what the right word is, but we're having this conversation on Memorial Day here in America. So I think that's fun. So that's great. There's other forces helping us to move forward here. Yep. Great. And frankly, our differences are as interesting or more interesting to me than our commonalities. So I trust the process of creative conflict and divergences and coming together, because that's how new things can evolve. Yes. Good. Cool. All right. Great. Thanks, brother.